It's time to rank the Superbike class of 2026 from worst to best. People often tell me that Superbikes are irrelevant, that we need to focus on affordable, approachable bikes. But you know what? We need people dreaming big. Motorcycles are aspirational, and by God, in a world that feels hopeless, we need some big power bikes. Superbikes are the pinnacle of a manufacturer's performance and prowess, but they're not all built equally. Some manufacturers are resting on their laurels, while others are continuously evolving and getting better. Lucky for you, I've ridden and or owned every bike on the list today, several of them on road and on track, so no guesswork and no spec sheet analysis. And by the way, if you're lucky enough to see this video the day it goes live, check out our giveaway Ducati Panigale V4 and $2,500 cash. You only have today and tomorrow to get entered to win. This was a short sweepstakes, just 7 days, so don't miss it. All right, so why don't we get started with the bottom of the barrel, a bike you probably forgot existed, the Buell Hammerhead 1190. Is there anything more American than a big, powerful V-twin motorcycle? Okay, I guess the Italians did that for a long time, and then the Japanese had some iconic V-twins too. Perhaps the most iconic American thing is having a company being bought and sold many times over, stripped for parts by private equity, and reskinning an old product with a veneer of fancy marketing. Unfortunately, that's exactly what the Buell Hammerhead is. This is functionally an EBR 1190 RX, which stood for Eric Buell Racing, which was the company Eric Buell launched after working at Harley-Davidson. The bike launched in 2014, and it featured an 1190cc 72-degree V-twin producing 185 horsepower and 102 foot-pounds of torque. With advanced electronics for the time, lightweight handling, and the signature quirky Buell brakes and design characteristics, it was America's version of a real superbike. But the Buell was never particularly competitive in racing, picking up mixed results in AMA Superbike and gathering just a single point in World Superbike. This is functionally a 2014 model year bike being sold for 2026 prices at $21,000 MSRP with very last generation technology. I had the opportunity to ride one of these on road and track as a collaboration with Buell, and it's nowhere near the superbike category today. I'm sorry to say it. But there is a twist. Even though this bike is woefully outgunned in every way, it represents an extremely interesting and charming analog experience in the superbike class of 2026. If you want a rowdy, old-school V-twin experience, something sort of akin to the badass L-twin Ducati superbikes of days past, with 0 miles on the clock and brand spanking new, this could be your bike. We've always wished the best for Buell and EBR, but sadly, they are here for 2026. Now let's move on to our next bike and head over to the land of the rising sun, where Suzuki is next up on the chopping block. The GSX-R1000, the Suzuki GSX-R1000R, a bike that you're not allowed to criticize meaningfully on the internet unless you are making very tired and canned Suzuki squid jokes. To critically analyze the big Gixxer is to invite serious and vociferous reprimands from the die-hard fans of the Hamamatsu brand. Here's the thing though, the claim to fame that fans have of this bike is that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, that notion defies the very reason we go superbike riding and racing. We should constantly seek improvement, refinement, incremental gain, and the final edge of performance. The GSX-R1000 has slowly optimized itself for a very narrow band of users. Those seeking nostalgia from a Japanese mark and the niche world of superbike endurance racing in Japan. The GSX-R1000 is no longer seriously used competitively on the world stage, having been relegated to a few national-level privateer teams. Suzuki also pulled out of MotoGP at the end of the 2022 season. Which, for as critical as I am of Suzuki, I was truly gutted when I heard that news. The GSX-R was an amazing bike, and Alex Rins looked killer on that thing. I mean, it even won a championship in 2020 with Joan Mir. Did we all just collectively dream that up? Didn't they win at Phillip Island at the end of the 2022 season? It's crazy. Suzuki has slowly drifted from relevancy in this category, despite the fact that the bike received minor updates recently. It's the stalwart defender of the old reliable Japanese thousands. It has a TI-83 for a dashboard, rudimentary electronics, and it's very old school. It makes 202 horsepower out of a traditional 999cc inline 4. It's received some winglets and a few other updates, and I guess it's back being sold in Europe, so the Euro squids are very happy about that. This bike's legendary reliability is evidenced by its standings in EWC, the World Endurance Championship, and for those of you who want the most bulletproof 1000, that's the proof in the pudding right there. Now, let's stay on the topic of Japanese bikes and move over to a slightly controversial pick, one that might not technically be allowed in this category, but it's relevant for me to bring up: the mighty H2. Okay, so the H2 has fully cemented its status as a meme bike, in my opinion. It's the new age shorthand for Turbo Hayabusa, in that any rider demonstrating poor skill online quickly gets met with the comment, "I've seen enough, give this man an H2." Kawasaki's supercharged inline 4 is technically the most powerful engine in today's video, and it remains the fastest production motorcycle in the world. However, that doesn't really tell you the whole story. The demented souls who purchase an H2 do so for a few reasons. They either want instant internet clout, they want to compete in a mile event, or they just simply want bragging rights. The H2's riding characteristics are less of an agile superbike and more of an intercontinental ballistic missile. I owned one of these bikes back in 2023 where I ran it at the Texas Mile, where I achieved 211 miles per hour from a standing start, and I lived to tell the tale after riding it on the street. H2s are fat, they're rowdy, they make crazy noises, and they're one of the most absurd bikes you could spend money on. They're a ton of fun in very small doses, and that's where the problem lies. Much like Turbo Hayabusas of days past, of which I also owned and built one of those, they're too specialized in one particular skill set, going disgustingly fast in a straight line for a long time. There's several bikes on the list today that would beat an H2 from 60 to 160. However, with enough runway, there's basically nothing on the planet that's going to keep up with you because the H2 just keeps pulling past 180 miles an hour. It's absolutely absurd. Beyond that, the bike was released in 2015 and received minor updates and has not kept up with the amazing advances we see in the category. It's a really cool bike, but it's not even close to being in the podium places today. All right, let's jump over to Europe, where you think I've chosen the BMW S1000RR, but you'd be wrong. Aprilia's RSV4 finds itself a bit further down the order for today's video, and there's a few reasons for that. First of all, this bike is a pig. The RSV4's frame and engine design trace all the way back to 2009, and while it is cool that Aprilia has refined and iterated on the platform for so long, it does present some downsides. Since the fundamental architecture hasn't changed in so long, weight keeps getting added to each generation. More electronics, wires, winglets, yada yada. On top of that, I'm not sure if it's the weight of the crank or the overall design of the bike, but it feels really heavy on the track. Side to side, this bike requires a lot of muscle to get it around corners. So what are the advantages? Well, Aprilia is owned by the Piaggio Group, which means their bikes are able to be priced more competitively than other bikes. Less R&D over the years also means the price hasn't ballooned either. A base RSV4 1100 is going to run you $19,699, and for that, you get a 1099cc V4 that makes 220 horsepower. Yes, you heard me right. And this might be the best sounding bike in today's ranking. Something about Aprilia's V4 is just magical, heavenly, wonderful, and truthfully, it's reason alone to buy the bike. So these are viciously powerful, have a killer sound, and they're really exotic. Sounds pretty good to me. What's the catch? Well, Aprilias are more complicated to live with. Service and parts are harder to come across, and honestly, with how heavy these things are, you're better off just getting a 210 V4 for the same engine, enjoying it as a street bike, and calling it a day. I really hope Aprilia can sweep the MotoGP's Rider Championship this year with Marco Bezzecchi. However, it would be even funnier if they did it with Jorge Martin, which would be the most Jorge Martin thing to ever happen, wouldn't it? But we all know Marc Marquez is probably going to take it, right? But even if they do, I think Aprilia owes it to themselves to develop the V4 platform to compete. Speaking of which, since this is a 1099cc engine, it's not used in any competition environments beyond dads at track days, to my knowledge. So it's a bit silly that the dashboard says be a racer when you fire it up, and you literally can't race it unless you're talking like, small potatoes club racing stuff. Then again, my Touareg 660 also says be a racer, which I suppose I take to heart when I pass leader bikes on the outside at Kodo with it. Let's move on to greener pastures, literally, with the next bike. The Kawasaki ZX-10R is a bike that really stands out from the crowd. Loud, flashy green paint, screaming inline 4, the Ninja logo emblazoned on the side. It's definitely a boyhood vision and dream of a superbike if I've ever seen it. The ZX-10R has been kept very competitive over the years, receiving many updates and styling changes. Notably, it was an extremely winning package in the mid-2010s under the stewardship of a certain Jonathan Rea in World Superbike. The bike still races in World Superbike, as Kawasaki is very proud of their efforts there, and since they don't compete in MotoGP and have limited factory involvement in other Superbike racing, that's kind of their bread and butter. Shout out to my boy Garrett Gerloff on the Kawi this year. He's been making various moves closer to the front, and we love to see it. I've personally found the ZX-10 to be a very twitchy bike on track. It has a very light switch throttle, and it's kind of hard to find nuance and smoothness. It's a bike that asks to be thrashed and ridden very aggressively. I remember a guy I used to race with in CMRA had a ZX-10, and he came into the pits one time after a very fast session, and he told us, "It feels like I'm gonna crash at every single corner." And then our other buddy said, "Yup, that's what it's supposed to feel like." The ZX-10 is a chaotic bike to live with and ride, but it's surprisingly good on road. A 998cc traditional inline-4 engine produces 203 horsepower, which is nothing to scoff at. You got a nice looking TFT dash, it pulls it all together, and a $16,999 price tag for a non-ABS model is pretty sweet. And I love that you can pick these up with no ABS and just get started making your own track day beast. That's pretty cool. It's a totally different perspective from the other Euro bikes that are laden with features. The ZX-10 is honest, green, and fun, but it's certainly not the best. Let's move over to another storied nameplate. Honda re-released the RRR Fireblade in 2020, marking the brand's serious commitment to return to the top step of road racing. The early 2020s was a tough time for Honda's racing efforts and HRC in general. Marc Marquez famously got smashed up in Jerez, they lost their talisman, and they started, well, sucking. They had no major wins or relevancy in other road racing categories like World Superbike, and it culminated with Repsol, the huge Spanish oil and gas company, leaving their decades-long partnership. So yeah, no more new cool Repsol livery Fireblades. The Fireblade was a pretty juicy proposition when it debuted. It had a MotoGP-derived bore and stroke and an absurd 217 horsepower output from its 999cc inline-4 and electronic Öhlins suspension to match. And at $28,999, it's certainly priced like a homologated special, even though they technically could price it higher per the rules. In honesty, this bike represents a classic return to form for Honda, making expensive exotica that goes racing. Unfortunately, all of that effort has not really translated to many wins or successes, and as much as it pains me to say, it ain't the 90s anymore. The Fireblade excels in environments that the Gixxer does, in endurance racing and tests of reliability and proper road racing, such as the Isle of Man TT, where it's extremely competitive. You can make the case that this represents more road relevancy for people as opposed to thinly disguised MotoGP replicas for World Superbike, but I think Honda still needs to build something that can truly dust up on the competition. The Fireblade has serious road presence and panache. The Honda badge still carries a lot of clout. For older riders, the Fireblade was the bike of the day, and the new one still tickles their fancy. Despite the bike's reputation for being easy to ride, I had one of these in 2021, and I found it to be completely coked out. The power band is like an R6 on steroids, and once it's flashed, it's preposterously fast, almost unrideable on the street, if I'm being honest. Without flashing the ECU, this bike doesn't make much more than about 188 horsepower, and that's still very fast, but not nearly as insane as the engine is capable of. The blade is still special, and it's best for riders who want that old school Fireblade cachet and something with lots of road relevancy, but isn't as much of a dinosaur as the Gixxer. Let's check out our third place pick and the last Japanese bike on the list. Third place on the podium today is the Yamaha R1. What else can be said about the R1? It's the bike that put the superbike category on notice in 2015 with the first of its kind IMU system on a production bike. As the cross-plane crank from the M1 MotoGP bike, so it sounds wicked. It's not too expensive, so people can get into it, and it's one of the best turnkey track bikes in the category with a ton of built-in knowledge and supporting parts. The downside? Well, it's quite down on power compared to its rivals nowadays. The chassis and electronics are kinda dated, and besides getting some updated calipers and winglets, this is basically the same bike since 2015. The R1 is competitive though, taking part in World Superbike, Isle of Man TT, national level racing, club racing all around the world, and more. Yamaha's also in MotoGP, so they've got serious credentials and pedigree. The R1 represents the most complete and well-rounded package for a wide variety of riders, and it's still one of the most iconic leader bikes on planet Earth. It's one of those bikes that you don't have to explain. You just say, yep, I got an R1, and it sort of just speaks for itself. The design is very cool, it's aged very gracefully, and the exhaust note is to die for. The R1M represents Yamaha's more flex offender style bike, but it truly is just semi-active Olin suspension and some carbon fiber. The R1 is the bike you buy because you want something that just simply works every time you ride it, but has a little bit of unique character that you just don't find in other Japanese motorcycles. I've had two R1s for this channel, one back in 2020 as a giveaway bike, and an R1M back in 2023 as a giveaway bike, and they've always been a joy to own. I've often contemplated doing an R1 track build to see if I can do a sub 2-minute lap time at Eagles Canyon Raceway, but maybe in a few years, and maybe when I'm just trying to complete some side quests. I don't think I have time for that right now. Not much else to say about it, it's just a great solution to the 1000cc Superbike problem. Okay, second place. It might not be what you think. It pains me to do this because, as many of you know, I don't spiritually align with this motorcycle very well, but in terms of cultural relevancy, constant improvement, even in the face of brutal race results, and overall power, fit, finish, and execution, the S1000RR finds its place second on our list. Look, I know that's going to upset many of you, but it's simply undeniable that the S1K has become a cultural force. On Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, hell, even Jixer Bra's gotten like 3 of these things because whether you do wheelies with them, rev bomb them like Brazilians do, or just do those goofy roller shots on the highway where you put your elbows up and make weird hand gestures, the S1K has solidified its place towards the top of the castle. The bike is chock full of updates, electronics, ass loads of power, and as a street bike, it works pretty damn well. BMW is known for making mostly touring bikes, so even on the S1K, they give you some nice creature comforts. They were the first to slap cruise control on a superbike, which is tantamount to sacrilege according to other manufacturers. It's a potent weapon on track, it has status in the streets, and ultimately, that's what a lot of people were looking for. You can option these up to some pretty eye-watering prices, including getting the homologated M1000RR, but BMW was able to clinch 2 titles in World Superbike thanks to Toprak Razgatlioglu, and since then, well, not so many results. Turns out you need an alien on that bike. BMW floundered around in World Superbike for years and years until they got the alien on board, and he got it done, with 13 wins in a row and 2 titles. It's pretty impressive. BMW also has some decent pedigree on the Isle of Man TT and in national level superbike racing. So if you're looking for clout, power, you don't mind dropping some extra cash, the Bimmer makes some pretty good sense. Personally, I find them a little bit cold. I've ridden the S1000RR on track at Jerez in Spain. I've also spun a few laps at my local track on one, and I had one as a giveaway bike back in early 2024. They've never really made a big impression on me, and I never thought to myself, wow, I have to have this bike. So I respect it, I recognize it, but it just ain't for me. Okay, what's first on the list? Well, if you're a big Yami noob fan, you already know where this is going. So for our number 1 spot, the best superbike for 2026, come on, it's none other than the Panigale V4 from Ducati. When it comes to building go-fast race bikes for the street, nobody is even in the same zip code as Ducati in 2026. And anyone that suggests otherwise is simply not a serious person. Power, you got it. 209 horsepower out of the 1103cc V4, which can rev to 15,000 RPM. With an ECU flash, it's dyno confirmed at 211 wheel horsepower, according to internet sources. Want to flex? They've got you covered with the S model with Marchesini wheels and electronic suspension. You want to race it? You that crazy? Buy the V4R. That's the homologated special with a 998cc V4 that revs to 16,000 RPM and makes 243 horsepower. Oh yeah, it has a World Superbike specific gearbox with a neutral lockout and side pods for added downforce mid-corner. It has the DVO, or Ducati Vehicle Observer, which simulates 70 sensors. It can actuate the rear brake mid-corner, simulating a MotoGP rider's technique, even if you don't have the brake pressure on the front. That tech is on the base model too, by the way. I can personally attest to this bike's wonder and splendor, since it allowed me to produce my fastest ever lap time at Eagles Canyon Raceway, a 202.6, on a bone stock motorcycle with street tires. That was the first time I was riding it. That's simply insane. Ducati has more wins than anyone else in World Superbike. They currently dominate in MotoGP. Okay, Aprilia is having a really good year, but let's be real, Ducatis are the bikes you want to be on. They're involved in national level racing at every level, and if you can afford it, I highly recommend picking one up. To use Porsche's slogan, there is no substitute. Nothing even comes close to Ducati at the moment. And if you've ridden one on track at full pace, you'll agree. As I've ridden all of these bikes, nothing comes close to the Panigale V4. Now, if you love the Panigale V4 as much as I do, and if you're lucky enough to catch this video on the day it goes live, or even the day after, we have a giveaway going on the website right now. Head to the link in the description down below and get your chances locked and loaded to win this bike and $2,500 cash. The Panigale is truly the apex predator, and I do not see anyone coming for its throne for a long, long time. All right, that wraps up my thoughts on the Superbike category for 2026. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? You know in your heart of hearts, I am correct. I always have been, I always will be, always. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Also, none of this is real. You're dreaming. Wake up. Michael, wake up. Michael, wakey, wakey. Time to wake up, Michael. Come on. Rise and shine.